Good evening, good afternoon. This is your girl Jody ASMR. Tonight we're going to be relaxing and telling the scariest Halloween stories of 2024 that I could find on the internet, and some older ones because they're pretty darn good. And I apologize, I have been actually out of town. So I have not been able to get any material out, and I apologize. But thank you for coming back to my channel. I've got some different sounds on my body, some different rings, some pearls, to hopefully make this a super sensory experience. As long as you enjoy it, please let me know in the comments. If you would like to subscribe, please do. It would help the channel out so much. And I just appreciate every single one of you. I hope you all are enjoying the spooky season. I have been absolutely to the fullest. So, I will give you a little rundown of what I've been doing. I've gone to four Halloween events. Four. The first one I went to, maybe 5. So, Bloodview was early September. Not September, the Friday the 13th, though. Unfortunately, it was the weekend after that. That haunted house was surprisingly super scary, even though it was a little bit more old school. It was terrifying as far as you went through this haunted house that was pretty standard, but then you go through this forest that there's nobody there. You are by yourself, literally, and you don't even know if you're going the right way. All of a sudden you see like darkness, and then before you know it, somebody is jumping out at you, which I love. I love jump scares, oh my god. So then you enter another building, which is super long and dark. It was so dark in this part of the haunted house. I kept running into the dead end wall and had to back up because I figured out, okay, well, they would make it almost pitch black to where you'd miss it, and then you were at a dead end and you had to feel your way around it. So it was super scary, and then nobody would be there. And then all of a sudden, somebody would jump out and terrify the shit out of me. I'm not even kidding. That was the first one, and that was pretty darn good. Then I went to Cedar Point's Hollow Nights. Oh my gosh. The rides, everything after dark becomes black. I mean, you cannot see in front of you except for the people walking around and the different like glowing lights and the mist and the rides. But even the rides, lights was at Cedar Point because we did not have the Fright Pass. And they literally had so many people, they shut down the ride or the haunted house line because it was over 2.5 hours long. So, I did not experience that part of the Cedar Point Horror Nights, but I did experience the Maverick. Holy manoli, if you are a roller coaster junkie like I am, this becomes a completely different ride. If you've ever ridden the Maverick, you are in pitch black darkness, and we are in the front row the second time. And you go down into empty, like this endless darkness, and then all of a sudden you're turned around and you're in this mist, and you can feel that the water's really close because you know it is. I mean, the Maverick's right there in the water. And it's just completely horrifying. I can't even explain the feeling. It's amazing. If you love that scare, that not knowing what's coming next, that is the place to go. And the Maverick is the ride. So, we were walking back after we had ridden all of the rides that we wanted for the night. And where you head into, if you've been to Cedar Point, there's a little bridge that heads you into the barn yard, which is completely dark at this time. Now, as you go under the bridge, it says something like, and I can't remember exactly, but welcome to your nightmares. And they have paid actors and actresses, zombified, that have these knee pads on and skates, and they come right up to you in the middle of the crowd. They pick you out. I was literally holding on, and nothing scares me. I mean, very few haunted houses actually have me that scared to where I'm grabbing onto somebody else. It was wild. I really wanted to take my daughter last weekend, but we couldn't go, and we were just too tired Friday. So we went. Then the next one I went to was the number one haunted house I've ever been to, and it is the Slaughterhouse in Chippewa Lake, Ohio. Let me tell you about Chippewa Lake Slaughterhouse. It was once a real slaughterhouse for one, but due the way it is set up is indescribable. It is so terrifying. You go through each room that has a different smell. There are bodies that aren't bloody or anything, but you don't know which ones are real and which ones are not. So you're passing these mannequins and they're real. Sometimes all of them are real. It was so good. I literally had to take my daughter this last weekend after I went. It was amazing, and I would go again. Hands down, it was the best haunted house I'd ever been to. People come from all over the United States to visit this place. So tonight I thought I'd read this is by the real Dan Bully. And he writes, I had a heart attack at 25 years old on New Year's Eve. While I was at my home, I was alone. I wasn't really feeling well during the day, kind of like having the flu. Now this has been going on since Halloween. So I knew something was wrong. I canceled my plans. About 10 p.m. I started sweating uncontrollably, and within half an hour, I had this indescribable pain in my chest. Just because you're 25 does not mean you cannot have a heart attack. I want everybody to know that. So between the panic and the pain, I could not really do much. I absolutely thought I was going to die. Right on my own in New York. I somehow managed to dial 000. And for a final joke to the situation, I went into cardiac arrest exactly at midnight. Oh, New Year's Eve. Sometimes these, not in New York, New Year's Eve, you must have been in a different country. If anybody knows what 000 is. Now, this was 14 years ago. God, I'm old, he says. The cause was Takotsubo syndrome, an interesting and not well understood thing. There is a trigger for it. TTS was never really found, but they believe it was an infection of some sort. Reason why it had started at Halloween. I'm a really lucky dude, yes you are. On Halloween one night, 3 years ago, a robber got into my house when I was about 22. I was alone and wasn't really paying attention, but I did have a dog, and my dog noticed. My dog took over and bit the guy's leg, who had entered my house at this time and was creeping up behind me. My dog would not let go. My dad, because I still lived at home, heard the commotion, ran downstairs to see what in the world was going on. The robber tried to flee, heading back over the fence, with my brave dog still attached to their leg. Speaking of dogs, my dad had to pull my dog off this guy's leg because she would not let go. Police were called, but the guy was long gone. The dog is still alive. That's good. I think robbers in the night or people breaking into your house is one of my biggest fears. When I was younger, I haven't had these dreams in a while, but I used to have these night terrors where somebody would shoot me in the head in my sleep. It was awful, and it was so real. Like, I don't even know where that came from. Another life, maybe. sister was a little girl, she absolutely adored our maternal grandmother. Anything she liked, my sister liked. But one thing our grandmother really liked was opera. I vividly remember my sister asking her one day when she was about 6 if she liked that body roddy guy our mom liked to listen to, Nizam Dorma, a lot. I still think the body roddy when I see or hear his name. Interesting. I was 7 when it was Halloween and I was playing in my grandmother's front yard. I had my Halloween costume on and was so excited to go trick-or-treating. I was completely oblivious to what was going on around me, being so excited, when a random car pulled up beside me. A young lady with an older man pulled out a rabbit in a cage, and she said, "Hey, do you want to pet my cute rabbit?" I was foolish and naive, as it is with youth. So I approached the car, and I was within arm's reach of the lady when my heroic grandmother came running outside, screaming bloody murder at me. I cannot even remember what she was even saying, but I had never heard anything so intense come out of my grandmother's mouth. The car sped off, and my grandmother ripped me from the pavement and took me inside. At first I was a little bit angry because my costume had ripped. But then when she explained what was happening, I felt so grateful. Especially today, thinking back, it could have been a completely different situation had she had been just a couple seconds too late. So it was Halloween night, and my dad always likes to have a cookout while we all went trick-or-treating, and my mom passed out candy, kind of watched over the neighborhood kids. So one Halloween, he knocked over a propane tank in the garage, setting up his display to cook. He cracked the neck and it started spewing gas. Now, the tank had been between me and the door into the house. The garage was closed. Cleared the door about a half a second before it ignited from the gas water heater's pilot light. That is unbelievable, actually. Holy crap. I lost all the hair on my face and got a burn on my hand. Needless to say, I did not go trick-or-treating that night. I spent it in the hospital. The house was a total loss, but we all got out okay. Holy, it burned down the entire house. Oh, that's scary. That's really scary. So the scariest thing that ever happened to me during Halloween was, I'm gonna say, getting robbed at gunpoint. say that would have been my entire lifetime, but if it happened on Halloween, it's probably even scarier. The most scared I've ever been was when one of my kids at summer camp I worked at had a seizure while crossing the street. Now they hit their head on the curb as they fell. Not really knowing what to do, I waited for the paramedics to show up, and totally unable to help this unconscious kid that I was responsible for. I felt way more helpless than I did while handing my phone and wallet over to the asshole who pulled a gun on me. It's that responsibility that gets us. Years ago, when I was 16, I was kidnapped by my boyfriend. He was weirdly obsessed with me. He said that even though he was 18, he was actually 22. He tricked me into taking a ride in his new truck to a store a few blocks away. He said he wanted to pick up Halloween candy. But instead he drove out to the middle of nowhere and tried to rip off my clothes. I screamed and cried as loud as I could, but nobody could hear me. It was dark out, and after being there for at least 2 hours, he still would not let me leave. At that moment, I was convinced he was going to assay me and kill me in a panic. So I told him I loved him. Good thought. But that my mom found out how old he was, and that's why I broke up with him. That I really wanted to be with him, but I just couldn't. I told him that I really just wanted to hide the relationship from her, but I really wanted to be with him. It would be difficult to do if I wasn't back in time for curfew or trick-or-treating, because you would ground me and take away my car, which was all a lie. He was so ecstatic that he immediately took me back to my car. I did not go trick-or-treating. I hid for years. But I ran into him at a gas station when I was 19, so this poor woman had to hide from this man for 3 entire years. I swear I could feel my heart stop beating. Years later, I heard that he was caught in an FBI sting for online predators and went to prison. That's insane. I was on my way to a Halloween party with my best friend's dad and my best friend. My best friend's dad was driving and had a heart attack while he was driving this car going 90 miles an hour down the freeway. Oddly, I was perfectly calm. My friend was freaking out, but I've never felt more tranquil. I've read that apparently if everyone is freaking out, you are more likely to have a calm response because the body knows that someone has to be the one to make relatively rational decisions in order to survive. My dad was 12, I was out at a Halloween party. It was a sleepover for all the kids graduating primary school, heading into high school. I came from a small school, so there was only a handful of us. The host, this must be in a different country. The host invited his friend from out of state who was around 15 or 16. The host himself was only 14 because he repeated a few years. Okay, that makes sense. So I might have, upped a grade in the middle of a semester or a year. When it was time to go trick-or-treating, we had fun, but his friends made me feel uncomfortable. When we got home, we took off all of our costumes, got ready for bed. I curled up in my sleeping bag, and when I started to fall asleep, I felt two people slide right next to me. It was the host, who was 14, and his friend. So here's a little background. I was being friendly with both these guys because that's how I was raised. This whole event took years in therapy for me to realize just because I was friendly did not mean I was inviting them to do anything. So during this event, they were touching me. I was so scared. I was frozen on the spot and couldn't actually tell them to stop. Instead, I told them that my phone was almost out of charge and my mom said I had to keep it on. And if I didn't answer, she would be worried and call his mother. This was obviously very believable, and they led me out of bed where I proceeded to panic, text my mom to come get me. 14 years later, this is how crazy some of this is. I still have trouble with relationships and haven't actually made it past a first date. That makes me so angry. You have no idea. It really does. Now this one did not happen on Halloween, but it's pretty scary. Losing 3 liters of blood. I was on the way to the hospital for a routine checkup when I was 33 weeks pregnant. I wasn't feeling too well, and I left a bit early from the party I was at. Maybe it was Halloween. At the light, I suddenly gushed out all of this blood. It was like a bucket pouring out. Oh my God, I would have been terrified. My husband ran the red light and got us to the hospital. The baby's heart rate was very low, and within 20 minutes they got her out via emergency C-section. Thank God she survived, and they told me I had a total placenta eruption. I think those are pretty rare. Had we been at home, we would have both died. I had such an adrenaline rush that it took me days to actually realize how close to death we were. So, isn't it weird when you survive death that it takes a while to sink in, and maybe it doesn't always sink in fully that you have actually survived dying? I think that's one of the scariest things that ever happened to me was recently in a town one over from us. A young man was reported as a missing person. He had just vanished from his residence 2 weeks prior when he was reported missing. About a month later, they found his body half a block from our house. They had found his body under a blue tarp. I walk pretty frequently in our neighborhood, and I walk past that tarp many times. Authorities say the body was placed there, and I don't know what is scarier, knowing that a man's dead body was a half block away from where I was sleeping, or that his murder was on Halloween. So in 2018, this was a couple nights before All Hallows Eve. And I'm gonna be honest, I had no idea if I was actually going to be murdered or robbed. I was going home around 1 a.m. and I met a couple crying at the subway station, asking to call the police because they got robbed. The woman seemed drunk. The cops told me they really couldn't do anything. They would have to go to the station the day after to file a report. So me being the kind human being I am, I asked the couple if I could help them. They say they live close and, well, it was on my way home. Being the start of the holiday season, I felt that I should help them. I helped the girl get up. Her arms were around my shoulder and her boyfriend's. After 10 minutes, where the girl was agitated and weird, acting I assumed due to the alcohol, possibly drugs, we started to come up on a dark alley. That's when the guy takes a phone call, and I don't understand what he's saying because it is in a different language. The girl stops, stands up straight out of nowhere. Well, not drunk state anymore. Tells me in tears, I don't want to do this. I never wanted to do this. Please, please run. Go home. Run. Do not stay here. And she goes back while grabbing her boyfriend, who is screaming to me, "Where are you going? Come back, you." At the moment, everything felt weird, like it was surreal. But the more I look back at the situation, the more I feel like I got very, very lucky that night. Absolutely. I'm saying absolutely because you probably were going to be trafficked, and that is a fate worse than death in my mind. Now this happened at Disneyland. So this was not during Halloween, but it was still scary as hell. The first seat belt check went fine as I got on the ride, as did the second seatbelt check. However, as soon as we were midair, it popped off. It literally popped off. Thank God my aunt was sitting next to me and saw what was happening. She clung onto me so hard that her nails cracked and I had indentations of her hands exited the ride and told the ride attendant about what happened. All the ride attendant said was simply, "Oh, there was a coin jammed in the belt. It happens a lot." Wow. Well, okay. And she has actually a Wikipedia article about rocket rods. Somebody says happens a lot. What in the world does that mean? I mean, seriously, have they not replaced this type of seatbelt? I mean, you're putting everybody who gets on the ride's life in danger. A man had been stalking me for about a year. He had got my routine down that I had in the morning. I would wake up at 5, see my spouse off work in a detached garage-type room for 2 or 3 hours, take our dog to the park, then work in the garden or house until my spouse came home in the afternoon. It was the morning before Halloween that rings in my head so clear. That morning, it was kind of chilly, and my husband decided he wasn't going to go to work. He woke up before me and left me in bed to sleep in. When he let the dog out, he noticed the door to my workout room was ajar, but didn't notice anything else wrong, so he closed it. He called the dog and came back inside to play a few video games. The guy had been waiting for me in my workout room. He had heard someone come out, so he checked the back door and it was unlocked. He came into the house with his shoes off and his pants and belt undone, and had taken one of my knives from the kitchen drawer. What? When he rounded the corner to the living room, my husband and dog were there between him and me, sleeping nude with the door open to the bedroom. They were completely taken off guard. The dog went into murder protect mode, and my husband grabbed him and opened the door to get the guy outside and immediately called the police. Everything happened so quickly. It could have all gone down so differently. Well, yeah, if your husband had not chosen that day, isn't it funny how things happen? Like, why would he pick that day? Was it intuitive? Was it that it just was a coincidence? I don't know. It's hard for me to believe in coincidences. This actually happened 8 years ago, and every Halloween it brings it up in my mind vividly. It really sometimes gets to me. What if my husband hadn't randomly decided to stay home that morning? The dog is still alive, by the way. He turns 11 this year. So it was after Halloween, a few days past the celebrations. We were walking. I was walking with a few friends, and then they split ways. So now I'm alone walking on the sidewalk near a freeway overpass. I heard an enormous crash. A man, a 15-foot piece of guardrail, and a V8 motor came flying Unfortunately, the man was twisted in every direction, his body ripped to pieces right in front of my eyes. Apparently, he hit the guardrail in his car with such force the motor was ripped from the motor mounts and he flew through the windshield. It was right across from a fire station, but the guy was dead instantly. I walked away without a scratch, but it always has been a terrible, terrible memory. Yes. When I would say 17 or 18, we were driving north on 95 and traffic, it was hours and hours of traffic. And we came up to this blue station wagon. It was an older station wagon, and I'll never forget, I was in the back seat. My parents were driving, or my dad was driving. I looked over and one of the passengers from the car had somehow gotten his skull halfway embedded in the side rear passenger window, and I can just remember it in slow motion. This head being, it was so unnatural. I have no idea how he ended up like that or she ended up like that, but nobody survived the crash. What was so eerie was the position of the body as we passed, that his head was facing the traffic like we were on the left, and his head, his skull, was in the actual back back driver's side window. Like, just half of it. It was, I'll never forget that day. One holiday, just about around Christmas, my oldest daughter didn't come home from school. She was supposed to take the bus to her dad's house. He called me frantic about 6 p.m. asking if she was with me. I was at work, and the panic began. Police were called. They began looking all the while. My younger daughter was searching online comments for clues, and she found her sister. After several hours, what the police had gathered, they were not looking for a living 15-year-old. When my younger daughter, 13 at the time, realized where her sister was, EMS was sent, and the cops busted into the home. Terrifying a set of unsuspecting parents, I was not kept updated. It was chaos, and I didn't know my daughter was found. So she must have been passed away at the time. What they found was my daughter and another classmate. Oh my gosh. Trigger warning. Oh, this is so sad. Overdosed in the bedroom. Both were rushed to the hospital. They were found after my younger daughter followed a trail of comments online that indicated the two. Another trigger warning. Oh my gosh, this is really sad. We're planning on ending their lives. What? Oh my gosh, that just... Oh my gosh, my daughter coded once and the friend was comatose for a few days. But they both lived. They were committed to different psychiatric facilities once they were cleared medically. Oh, thank God. months, and I can't begin to describe the terror of those days. The first for hours I can't even think about because I will spiral into a full-blown panic attack. It has been years, but the holidays are never the same. And there has never been anything in my life to ever touch the physical illness, including terror of first not knowing where she was or what happened. Then the months of never letting her out of my sight, therapy, meds, and support. All happened, but it has been a very long road. She is better now, but that worry will never, ever go away. I just want to say I am proud of your younger daughter for being diligent, and maybe she knew where to look, but she saved her sister's life. That is crazy. Some of these are pretty intense. I had no idea when I searched scary Halloween stories that it was going to lead me to this. A few months ago, I had been at work for 2 hours when I got a call from the babysitter. She was watching my 3-year-old and 6-month-old. Her entire statement as soon as I answered, quote, 6-month-old's not breathing. I talked back and forth and found that he was unresponsive and not breathing at all. It took me a second to even realize what in the world was going on because I left 2 healthy children with her. Ultimately, I took off at a high rate of speed down the interstate and made it to the sitter. As my wife and her boss were about to head to the hospital and follow the ambulance, I jumped in. We made it to the hospital while praying and holding hands the entire time. When we got there, they took my wife and I back, as they continued to do CPR and pump more meds into him. After we saw him and sobbed, they took us to a nearby room where my wife and I talked with the doctor. He told us they had been doing CPR for 45 minutes. We knew the science. In the middle of that conversation, a nurse ran in to tell us that he had just developed an erratic and inconsistent 20 beat per minute heart rate. At this time, we knew that would come back and had no chance of survival and would be misery for him. We told them to stop. It was the hardest, scariest, and most soul-crushing 30 minutes of my life. It was ultimately deemed to be SIDS, and that there wasn't a single thing they could do to find what caused it. He was perfectly healthy, the happiest baby I'd ever seen. Did anybody actually investigate the babysitter? Munchausen syndrome, which is the need for attention through doing harm usually to your own child, can also be doing harm to other children, even if they're not your own. This was a day after Christmas, 1998. I was 9. In the car with my mom, who was 36, my cousin, who was almost 14. We had been traveling out of state about 10 hours. We were visiting my mother's parents and her siblings, including my cousin's mother. His mom and dad were divorced asleep, as many children do when they get into the car. I know I did. Some undetermined amount of time later, I woke up and heard just noise, the strangest crushing noise I had ever heard. There were people, vehicles, sirens looking around. I couldn't tell what happened. I was covered in blood that wasn't mine. Panic set in someone white is all I can remember. I assumed it was a paramedic. They approached me and told me to stay calm. I would be okay. I was life flighted out of that accident shortly after. Oh my goodness, we had hit a tractor trailer parked on the side of the road. He had no signals out. It was foggy, dark. I was told that he had THC in his system as well. By the time my mom must have realized he was even sitting there, it was too late, and the brakes gave out. Oddly enough, 6 months later, there was a recall on that car that we were driving for brakes. Not being able to stop during an accident. I won't, and I don't need to go into gory details. I'm sure you can imagine. But suffice it to say, my mother had a closed casket. My cousin died of internal bleeding, and I almost died, but the doctor said the only thing that saved me was that I was asleep. I was relaxed enough when we hit, so the internal damage I suffered, even though it was life-threatening, still wasn't as bad as it could have been if I had been tensed up and awake. I was close enough to medical help that I actually survived. This person says, I can't think of a time I was more scared. Well, yeah, I mean, your mom and your cousin died. That's terrible. There's a lot of sad and very scary stories that happened around the holidays. Last year when we were driving back from Montana, we were in North Dakota. Now, my fiance and I we were both awake. And all of a sudden, we look over and there is a tractor trailer that had, there was skid marks at least a mile, back as we looked. He had hit a car that had just come right in front of him. He was completely incapable of stopping. The car looked like it was a horseshoe around the front bumper. Obviously, the man or woman did not survive. However, can you imagine being the person actually driving the tractor trailer? He will live with that forever. I don't care how many times you see an accident, if, God forbid, you actually, on accident, kill somebody like that for whatever reason. They were high, they were asleep. The guy had been coming on to the freeway and just literally just crossed right over in front. Now, I don't know if he was actually trying to kill himself. I don't know. We will never know. I cannot find this story. It was such a small rural town. But it must have just happened because the police were not even on the scene yet. this because this is very intense. How about this? We're going to read. I'm just going to move on to just Halloween creepy stories. As credit. When I was 13, my mom and dad invited round of previous neighbors from the block of flats we lived in until I was 5 years old. I had been sent to bed but could still hear everybody talking about this or that until the woman who was a neighbor next door said, "Hey Dixie, Mom, do you remember when Dixie used to complain that there was someone in his room?" Well, there's a family that just moved into the floor above you who has a 3-year-old son. And guess what? He is complaining that there is the same Dixie in his room. What? Alright, well that's super creepy because your childhood nightmares have been confirmed by another young child that doesn't even know you. This completely creeped me out. I had no recollection of any of this, so the next day I questioned my mother. Her first reaction was, "You don't remember." Then she told me all about the weird stuff that used to happen. Footsteps up and down the hall. Things of mine going missing. She said the final thing to happen was when she was listening to a record one day and it started to slow down. Like someone was holding a finger gently on the bladder until it finally came to a stop. My mother said she snapped at this point and started shouting, "You will leave us alone. I don't know who you are, but you will leave." As soon as she said those words, the record went back to playing normally, and we never experienced anything from this entity again. I've never experienced anything like that since, and these days I'm quite skeptical of stories, but I believe my mom. And the honest thing is that how would a young child have the same entity and the name out of nowhere? It is even stranger how I found out about it. It was 10 years later, and that little kid was experiencing the same thing. This is 100% true. I don't care if you believe it or not. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times and I remember them fondly. I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. I was the eldest, so it was a little bit of, Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of an old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept towards the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown. The creepiest thing was that she wasn't just any entity or person or I don't know what, but she was covered in blood, holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but I was too terrified to even form the words. My parents saw how upset I was, but when I was finally able to tell them what I saw, my dad got angry and told me that it was a dream. Go back to bed. I refused. I kept crying, screaming until he had enough and scratched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way, trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open, and said, "See, there's nothing there." To this day, I've never seen the look of fear and shock that was on my father's face when that woman turned and stared at both of us, slowly stood up, dripping with blood, and a knife in her hand. Quickly, my dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police. While he went and got his gun, he went back to the door with the 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He questioned her what she was doing there. "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me," she said. My dad told her that the police were coming and she freaked out, grabbed the knife, and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. So edit. I had forgotten to mention this in my earlier post, that after she left, my dad called and warned my crazy uncle who lived next door to what was happening. Apparently, he was waiting on his front porch with his shotgun when she walked by. My uncle pointed it at her and said, "Just keep moving, you." So there is an update. I just spoke to my mother and she said that they never found out the entire story. Apparently she was crazy and off her medication. Her and her husband had got into a fight and she tried to attack him with the knife. Luckily, she did not seriously hurt him. When he got her out of the house, she cut herself with the knife, either trying to or make it look like her husband did it. The police never talked to us about it, so that's just what they heard from the woman's neighbor. I mean, demons and ghosts are always creepy, but when it's real, it's real, people. Something very similar happened to a friend of mine. It was about 1 a.m. and he heard a noise outside his front door. It was really dark in his front yard, so he could not see much through the people because he didn't want to open the door. He couldn't see anything, but he could tell that something was below the people. He decided to open the door slowly, and as soon as he did, an older lady who was covered in blood and only wearing a t-shirt So I've never seen that. The cops finally show up and detain the woman. They get to the bottom of the story. So it turns out the woman was his neighbor. She was extremely drunk. She had been drinking and locked herself out of her house and tried to get back in by breaking the window with her face and hands. Side note, the neighbor no longer calls the police when my friend has parties. So apparently she was kind of one of those people that would harass his friend for having loud parties. Well, after that little shenanigans, I guess that wasn't gonna happen. I wouldn't either. So this happened about the beginning of October. I was at university. It was the first part of the year. My university was bisected by a big lake with a bridge going across it with an island, a gazebo right in the middle. One night I was walking down the side of the lake about to cross. I wanted to go to the dorm, which was on the other side. As I was walking down the sidewalk, I noticed some kid in a gray-white hoodie with the hood up, walking across the section of the bridge, which is on my side of the gazebo, towards my sidewalk. I really didn't think anything of him until I walked by a big tree which blocked my line of sight for just a split second, and that is all it takes. And when I did glance back at the bridge, there was no one there. There is no way he could have possibly walked off the bridge. He would have had to go right by me, and if he had turned around in a split second, I couldn't see him. He wouldn't have had any time to get all the way back to the island either. He was just gone. So this gets creepier. About a year later, I was about to tell this story to my friend who had been abroad that semester. He'd never heard of it, and before I even got to what I saw, he cut in with, wait, did you see a guy in a hoodie disappear? Yes, I did. He said he had seen something just like that his freshman year. Weird. I hated walking across the bridge alone from there on out. I would say you have an apparition. I would look into the history of your university to see if there was any deaths on that bridge. So when I was younger, we frequently visited my grandparents, always around the holidays. We didn't live in the same town, but it was what we did. My aunt lived 2 houses down from my grandparents. The lady in the house between the two of them was really creepy. She was a large woman, over 6 foot tall. She wore logging chains around her neck, a dress, and work boots. The only time I remember seeing her outside was either in the garden in the back or when she was washing the outside of her house, scrubbing the actual building. For some reason, she felt like she had to do this often. During these times, she would yell at us kids and call us kids names and all sorts of things. She would tell us the devil would be coming for us. The adults told us to leave her alone and to just avoid her. They didn't want us causing her to have retribution or have some reason to attack us. We would run the distance between my aunts and my grandparents because when you passed by, she was always watching out of her window. Now that's creepy. It was so creepy and we never went alone. One Halloween, one of the cousins dared us, of course, to trick or treat her house. I can remember how scared I was, my heart racing, I was sweating, but I didn't want to be the chicken. Plus, I was going with the group. Nothing could happen, right? I can't remember which one of us, but one of us rang the doorbell and there was a lot of banging noises in the house, suddenly like doors slamming. When this woman answered the door, she had several severed heads in her hands, and we all went screaming. The adults told us it was a Halloween prop, and we knew we shouldn't be bothering her and deserved to be scared. But about a month later, my parents got a phone call that the lady had tried to kill my aunt while she was bringing in groceries and had my young cousin in her arms. The lady had one of those rope saws, like that you cut with. And had come up behind my aunt with it. She put it over her head and around her neck and proceeded to saw. My aunt naturally flipped out and started kicking the door. My uncle came and beat the lady down with a fire poker. So the police ensued an investigation and it revealed that the woman had been digging. Oh my gosh, this is freaking creepy. This is what worries me, I swear, sometimes when people get really weird. So the police investigation revealed that the woman had been digging tunnels under her home, which were coming up under my aunt's, my grandparents, and another neighbor's house. She had been bringing the dirt up and putting it in the raised beds of the gardens. She had a shrine of some sort underground which had a few real severed heads around it. My aunt survived, but has a long scar across her neck. So even though I was chased off by somebody holding severed heads, they were actually real. Wow, I mean, that's... I don't even know. I had such a crazy neighbor in Florida. I can see this happening. That's how crazy she was. People get really demented, especially when they live alone and things start to change in their mind. It just is scary and terrifying. as you don't know the truth, then what are you gonna do? Just go up and accuse somebody of severing heads? You just can't do that. So this is not necessarily Halloween, but they are true scary stories from Reddit. A few years ago, I was walking through the woods off the beaten path, and I smelled this really overpowering sweet smell. Not a pleasant sweet smell, though. Being curious, I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look, and I found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and was not looking great. I would imagine not. Swollen and green, black with various runny bits. And unfortunately, the local wildlife had also been dining on him for a few days. I called the police, who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Now, being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive, and it started getting dark. I was just sitting there in the dark with this dead body for a long time. I don't know if I could do that. Could you? I would like to know in the comments if that is something that you could have done. Because I mean, I would have waited, but not next to the dead body. Just in case, what if somebody else is watching you? I don't know. As always, my fear is that it's not necessarily the person is dead that I'm worried about. It's the person who might still be there. So it turns out he wasn't murdered, but did it himself. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him, and he would talk to me, but he would never say nice things. He was angry I had disturbed his resting place, and he wanted me to do the same thing he did to himself. I say it was probably my imagination, but all very disturbing. Even today, he still turns up in my dreams from time to time. It was two years ago. I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night. The drive was about 2 hours long. I didn't stay the night. Because I had to be back for work the next day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on both sides. So, kind of the creepy ones you see in the movies. I've been driving around 45 minutes and I was starting to get really tired. Sometimes suddenly you just become really tired out of nowhere. But that was happening to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Never park where you do not feel safe. After it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up and my tiredness was not going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over onto the side of the road, onto the grass behind some bushes to try to hide my car from anyone else who was going to drive past. I mean, the roads weren't completely empty. I would come across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22 and fell asleep. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock. It was 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still kind of in a haze of tiredness, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep now. Okay, this is where I would have been out of there. I would have been so wide awake. Yeah, no. I was later awoken by the same sound. It was 12:40. Now this time it freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. A thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car. But why would it return an hour after it had left the previous time? So I decided to look in my rearview mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. And now, at the time, I would have been paralyzed with fear. You couldn't have paid me to stay. I thought it was the damn hook killer. You know, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. Well, screw that, I thought to myself. I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around to it, there was another car there, parked off to the side of the road with the other driver's side door open. And as I came around, oh my gosh, I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there, and there was nobody there. So you know where he was, right? But then I looked in my rearview mirror again. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden a guy comes sprinting. I mean sprinting around the corner. Oh, that's scary. He starts screaming at me at the top of his lungs, shouting, hey, you, get the F out of your car. Now, I got the heck out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. This is a very good moral to the story. Don't sleep on the side of a deserted road, please. Always, even rest stops can be scary. Very scary. Remember the couple that saw the DC shooter while they were at a rest stop? Things happen. Everybody says it's never gonna happen to you, but it can, absolutely. So a few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to go, and that's it. Because of the construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk by the streets. Yet the streets were So it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my own street. Because you see, there was this man walking by himself, possibly in his 40s, a little scruffy, but not homeless necessarily. The sidewalk was narrow and I didn't want to freak him out, so when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you." He turned around immediately and gave me this really angry, pissed off look. I turned down my street and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was a effing C-word and he was going to kill me and my family. What? Because you sat on your left. What? I live right off the corner and didn't want him to figure that out. I decided to do another loop around the block. But that's not even the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my front stoop, staring out at the street like he knew I lived there. This man saw me ride by again, but didn't say anything. I ended up going back to my friend's house, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. So edit. The guy in question was definitely not actually homeless. We have a large population of mentally ill in our area, unfortunately. So I didn't think the sidewalk was too narrow to pass. Otherwise, I would not have disturbed him. Half the scary part was that he looked pretty much completely normal from my perspective. That being said, I ended up texting my mom and she made the decision not to notify law enforcement until my bike was stolen. If you know you live in a neighborhood that can be sketchy at certain times in the night, please use your noggin. Believe me, throughout my life, I have lived in really bad parts of Florida where I would not go outside during hardly the day, let alone the night. My car was parked underground, and the only time I ever left was actually to just leave the building. So this stuff does happen. I had awesome parents who let me sleep in the living room on weeknights when I was very young. The reason being my sister was a light sleeper and I could stay up until dawn. But of course, I always ended up sleeping on the couch because Nick at Night made me tired. So, above and beyond all that, one night I wake up to the prickly feeling, that gut-wrenching, sick feeling in your stomach. It's an instinct, an intuition. I bolted into a sitting position and stared out the front window. Now we live in rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of darkness and trees. In perfect light cast from the moon, I see a silhouette of someone in his mid to late 30s in the tree, staring into my house. The family dog dashes to the window, snarling into the glass. I am petrified, run into my parents' room and try to explain exactly what is going on outside. My dad jumps up and grabs a defensive object, darts up from the bedroom out into the family room and outside with the dog to beat the crap out of the hot head who had decided to climb a tree and stare into our house. I am terrified at this point. My mom is holding me until my dad comes back and says he saw no one and to go to bed. So I decide to sleep in my regular bedroom. I fill in my sister as to what happened. Dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We're all still, and I finally think I can sleep. But nope, because I noticed the man is now outside my bedroom window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he gives me a signal. Oh, that is so scary. That gives me chills. And he runs away, just turning around to run a straight line. I swear I couldn't stop crying for hours. Yeah, I definitely. Why do people think it's okay to do this? My house sits farther back in the lot than most other houses. I must say it's a strange layout. The sidewalk runs the length of the living room and ends at the front porch, which lets right into the living room. Large windows that do not open allow great light to get into the living room, but at the cost of zero privacy at night. The rest of my family was on vacation. I had the house to myself. I had decided I would get smashed while I passed out on the couch in the living room at about 9. Party. The couch is right underneath these big windows. I woke up suddenly, not knowing why. I had a severe case of the chills, and I could not figure out what the source was. Then the banging started. It came from right above me. It was frozen. You know the type of frozen where you can't move, your heart's racing, you're sweating, but you don't want to breathe. I finally opened my eyes and looked up at the window. Somebody was standing there, pounding on the glass. Without moving, I looked at the cable box. It was around 3 in the morning. The banging continues. Then it stopped suddenly. I still did not move at all. Heck no. Just in case they didn't see you, hopefully you had a phone near you. Suddenly, the pounding commenced once again, this time coming from 2 different directions now. Someone is banging on the window and another person is banging at the front door. Oh my gosh. This reminds me of The Strangers. Have you ever seen that movie? If you haven't, it's a great scary movie to watch if you love scary movies. was just frozen. They're banging on the window. Front door, they keep doing it, stopping, doing it, stopping. They just would not go away. Finally, after about 40 minutes, they quit. It was the most terrifying event I can ever recall. Yes. It made me a nervous wreck after that. I called a friend the next day to see if he would come over and stay for the rest of the week. He responded, "Why? So that we can both be murdered in our sleep." That's not a very good friend. I was 17. I had just gotten my license. Back in high school, my friends and I had made it a mission to find abandoned houses to throw parties in. We had a few good candidates, but the mother lode was this one abandoned house I would pass on my way home from work. The house was an underdeveloped shell of a huge home with a large property in the back. I had told one of my friends about it, and one day before we went to see a movie, I looked for him and I took him to the house. It was about dusk in the summer, so I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house and we were there for 10 seconds tops before we pulled back to go to the main road. 1 minute later, this big truck pulls up behind us, high beams and all, riding our ass. My friend and I took note of that, but paid it no mind as we headed back to the main road. At the light, I turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station and the corner. On the corner and blocked us off. Out of the truck comes this big hulk of a man, and my friend and I are now scared to death. He raps on the window and I roll it down. Now, the really freaky part is that this is a busy road and there was no one in sight. He asked us what we were doing at that house, and I quickly lied and said we were making a U-turn. He doesn't believe me, stares at us for a few seconds, smiles, and sends us on our way, but clearly knowing I was full of shit. But needless to say, we did not go to that house for a party, and to this day the house remains unfinished, and I'm convinced it's a drug operation of some sort. Possibly. That's crazy. I mean, why? If it's not, I don't know. If it's a drug operation of some sort, you would think the house would be finished. Because they wouldn't have a shelter to cover their shenanigans. When I was about 10 years old, all of my cousins and siblings were over. There was about 10 of us. The parents, grandparents were out for an adult dinner. It was just the kids sitting around watching a few movies when all of a sudden the house started shaking. There was a large flash coming from the backyard. It felt as if a bomb dropped. We all heard, felt, and saw it. As a pack, we ran into the hallway. The eldest cousins in the group debated on calling the police, but opted to call the parents first. After a few minutes, we gained our courage and ventured out into the living room again, this time with weapons just in case. Always good to have weapons, yes. After an hour with no issues, the parents came home and thought we were insane. There was nothing wrong with the backyard, no neighbors reported anything. It's been 10 years and we still talk about it, trying to figure out what in the world it was. I mean, if there was no lightning or any weather in the area, then was at my parents' last summer during the holidays. It was around 3 a.m. and I was in my room on my computer when I got a call from my sister. Now, that was already a little bit weird since my sister's room is just down the hall from mine and she could have, walked over and just talked to me. I went to pick up the call, and as soon as I reached the phone, the call ended. I just assumed that she wanted to speak with me, so I got up and went to her room. As soon as I reached her door, she started screaming that someone was in the room with her, so I busted in, and nobody was there. After she stopped crying, she told me that she woke up and saw a dark shadow just centimeters from her face, and that's when she screamed. I told her that she called me, and she tells me that her phone is not even in her room, that she was sound asleep. Sure enough, her phone is actually downstairs in her purse. The weird part is that I have the log of her call on my phone. But guess what? She doesn't have the log on her phone. That is creepy. Can't ever imagine explaining this one. Well, at least it didn't happen to her again. I was delivering a hot tub to a contractor realtor in this fancy gated community near Branson, Missouri. When I arrived, the construction workers were in charge of telling me where the hot tub was supposed to go. The hot tub was going on the 4th floor balcony. Because of the way the house was built, the 4th floor was ground level. The other 3 floors were on the side of a hill by the driveway. And unfortunately, the driveway was even with the 1st floor entrance, if that makes sense. So I would say the back of the house was like flush against the ground, and then the 4th floor, that's what I'm guessing. I'd have to draw it out. I don't know, a lot of construction going on, but to get the hot tub on the balcony, I had to make a ramp, take it from the drive, down into the yard, up a ramp to the porch, through the living room, across the living room, out the back patio, and onto the deck. That's a lot. Problem with this was the deck was unfinished. A huge section of decking was missing. They had literally installed only enough decking so that I could go from the patio doors to the far corner of the deck where the hot tub would sit. Now that sounds very dangerous. There was no railing. The hot tub weighed 900 pounds, and it was a 4-story drop if I fell. So yeah, the front of the house was really high up. The construction workers volunteered to help me. I would have said yes. We got out onto the deck, crossed the narrow bridge of the installed decking to the corner, and I was about to lay it down. You move these on a dolly while the hot tub is on its edge. For those who don't know, laying it down isn't that hard. You tilt it, bring it down to your lap, grab the strap, securing it to the dolly, and lower it to the deck. It's very controlled, and I've done it 1,000 times. However, this deck wasn't finished. The contractor wanted to leave it on its edge. Okay, it's a lot harder to take it off when it's standing up because the dolly is under 900 pounds. Yeah, but I've done it before. I told them that we would have to put blocks under one side of the dolly wasn't wide enough to allow me to do this safely. So apparently this was not thought out very well. I popped the strap on the hot tub, put the box under, and I tilted the hot tub, but that put me with my feet 4 inches from the edge of the deck. With nothing but 4 stories of air behind me, I would have died. I don't think that this person should have to have done this. This is super, super, super dangerous. We were able to free the dolly on one side but not the other. The hot tub had to be leaned over further towards me. I tell everyone to freeze. They do. I didn't want anyone messing with it because I had to shift my feet back 5 inches so my heels were off the deck. I'm freaking out, but it's all going smooth so far. Well, yeah, you just put your feet hanging over the deck. This isn't looking good. I have a construction worker on each side of me helping support the tub. 3 construction workers freeing the dolly. One useless worker playing with the strap that is going to secure the tub to the house so that the wind doesn't blow the hot tub over. We are all inches from having the dolly freed when one of the construction workers freeing the dolly gets impatient and kicks the corner of the tub to dislodge it from the dolly. It worked for him, yeah, but unfortunately for me, I didn't have my feet set yet. I shout, I'm falling. The 2 guys beside me take the weight of the tub, but no one can get to me. My arms are windmilling. I'm bent, almost double backwards, trying my damnedest to stay on the deck. I can see the boulders down below out of the corner of my eye. I'm falling and there isn't anything I can do about it. I feel myself go. I'm falling. My heels slip out from underneath me. Nobody can reach me. Suddenly I'm flying forward. Something is under the small of my back and it's slamming into me in the bottom of the tub. The dolly is removed and the tub stood up with me hugging it before I find out what saved me. Wow. Talk about you were one lucky person. Holy crap. The useless guy playing with the strap had already secured one end to the house. When I fell, the strap was already behind me, hanging off the deck. The construction worker pulled it tight with his might, arresting my fall. It wasn't there for that purpose, but saved my life that day. I would have been dead if not for him. I thank him by sending him and his wife and kid to Breckenridge, Colorado for Christmas. That was nice. It was actually a vacation I'd saved for and was about to surprise my wife and daughter with, but I felt he deserved it more. That is really kind. Plus, my wife and daughter didn't know anything about it yet. That was one of the most scariest moments ever. Yeah. I mean, so he's in Colorado, and we all know that the Rocky Mountains are rocky, and if it's a free fall, there's nothing that's gonna get you like trees. It is literally just boulders and rocks. How about a couple more? I was almost abducted by 5 guys in a super shady part of town really late one night, but I was saved by a hero. So this is back in 2004. I was young and dumb, a 17-year-old country girl in the city for the first time for college. One night I decided I could totally safely this is never a good idea. Of course, I instantly end up wandering around a terrible part of the city. Most of the street lights are busted out, trash everywhere, loud arguments from inside the dilapidated row houses. In short, I wouldn't even want to be here in the middle of the day, let alone, in the middle of the night. A car drives up behind me and slows down so they're keeping pace with me for nearly an entire block. I look over and there are 5 unsavory looking men inside. By this point I was approaching an intersection. They pull up. They make a left and stop in the street directly in my path. Shit. I'm now completely panicked at this point, and I just stand there, deer in headlights, right in front of them. My mind went completely blank. I've never been that scared in my life. Yeah, because you're one little female and 5 guys that know why you are there by yourself because you don't really know the area. It didn't even make sense to try to run because they would have caught me without question. Yeah. I'm not really sure how long I was there for. But suddenly the porch light in the house, just past the parked car, comes on. Some dude casually strolls outside carrying a bag of trash. Thank God, right? And the car, for some reason, just peels away. I completely break down, crying, shaking. Dude spots me and listens to my probably incoherent story, takes me inside and gives me a soda. Then his roommate walks me back to my dorm. They were both lovely and invited me to check out their stand-up sometime. They were comedians, but unfortunately I was too young to get into their bar. I never saw them again. I don't even remember their names, but I feel pretty confident that if that guy had not decided to take his trash out at 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, my life would have been taken into a really horrible, dark place that night. For those of you saying it was completely my fault, I accept that. It was totally my fault, and I know, and I have been told I did a dumb thing. I have not done this again, and I'm extremely fortunate. And I am no longer that stupid. Here is the last one. Every time I stay at my grandmother's house, I hear someone walking upstairs. It starts at one side of the room, casually walks to the other and stops. This will happen maybe twice a night. I didn't start hearing it until I was about 14. My grandparents made me start sleeping in a different room on the first floor because they started sleeping in separate bedrooms, blah blah blah. Regardless, both of the rooms are also on the first floor. So if you'd like a little backstory, I've always been afraid of the upstairs at their house. I don't know why, but it's always freaked me out. I refuse to ever go up there alone. 23 now and I still won't go up alone. There's one room specifically. It's a long, narrow bedroom. When you open the door, there are closets on your left and right. A bed placed roughly in the middle of the room and a window on the far side opposite the door. I was told growing up by my parents that the sons of the previous owner claimed to see a gorilla or some dark figure come out of the closet at night, dance around the room and go back into the closet. Kind of an odd story, but I really thought nothing of it until I had to start sleeping in the other room. The room located directly below the scary room upstairs. So one night we all go to bed. All the lights in the house are completely off and I'm wide awake. I'm lying on the bed when I hear it thump, 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 starting at one end of the room upstairs. It got closer to me, passed right above me, and continued to the end of the room where it stopped. Well, I'm now wide awake, terrified out of my mind. It was no question to me that I'd heard footsteps. I knew that slow, casual pace. I was freaked out and went to my grandparents' room, or my grandfather's room at the time. I told him what I heard. He told me that the house is old and it creaks. You know, I really always disliked that reasoning. But he turned the dining room light on for me, so I felt a little safer. I tried going back to sleep, but then it started again, this time from where it ended the first time, by the window upstairs. It walks over me again, stops when it reaches the door, thinking it was over. Until 5 seconds later when I heard it coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence as it reached the landing. Then continuing on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Silence again as it reaches the first floor. Frozen in shock, whatever it was on my floor of the house, and sadly unaffected by the dining room light. I was staring at the doorway to my room. The dining room light was shining in and my vision began to distort. I felt dizzy with fear. I pulled the blankets over my head and suddenly heard scratching from inside my room. I knew exactly where it was coming from, too. My grandfather's gun case. It was very obvious. Scratching on the wood, long scratches down the front of the gun case door. I could even hear the door ever so slightly tapping, tapping, tapping against the frame as each scratching. I knew exactly where it was coming from. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I took a second to take a deep breath and let out a loud scream. In seconds, my grandparents had made it to my room and I was relieved. Needless to say, he still didn't believe me. So, I did what any young person would do. I draped a sheet over the side of the bed and slept underneath it. I wrapped myself tight in a comforter, put on headphones, and turned my back to the door. There would be a party of ghosts in my room, and I wouldn't even know. The next next morning, my grandparents told me. My grandfather told my grandmother about what happened the night before. She said, "Oh, that's silly. You know your cousin woke me up the last time she stayed here. She came in my room saying, 'I hear footsteps.' I slept under the bed for the rest of the week with them. I've stayed there countless times since that happened. I hear the footsteps every time. I sleep on top of the bed now, but keep my back